Ever worry about bear attacks? Well, most woodsmen do, even experienced ones. And what do you use to protect yourself? I have always felt that a rifle for deer hunting, elk hunting, whatever, was adequate for stopping a bear. But what if I'm alone and I'm working on my harvested elk or deer and then the bear attacks? I think I'm in trouble. Now, I've got some exciting news. In addition to talking about bears and bear guns and how to protect yourself in the woods, we have got a big announcement. Joseph is joining our team here. We're going to see how well he can put up with us and vice versa, and see if we can't get a few more exciting episodes, because Joseph brings to the table a lot of experience. This man knows his stuff, and he's going to start us off with some of the handguns he carries when he is in bear country. I guess you do all four of these at once?
Yeah, I'm the bear hunting outlaw Josie Wells. One in each armpit and a pair of cross draws.
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
I mean, if you're going to be prepared, be prepared.
Yeah, I guess. But don't you ever get confused about which one to pull first?
Whichever one's closest.
Okay. Well, Joseph, let's start where we probably need to start, is a fear of bears. I mean, how much of a threat really is it?
You know, statistically, there's a very small likelihood that you'll ever be attacked by a bear in the backcountry. And of course, it depends on the region, and even sometimes I won't say the subspecies of bear, but for instance, grizzly bears in Glacier National Park or the Teton National Park tend to be more aggressive than those in the interior of Alaska. And it could be a combination of features.
Probably because there's so many tourists wandering around looking juicy.
Yep. I should have said factors. Could be a combination of factors, including everything from frequent human encounters to genetics. Who really knows? Yeah. The fact is that people do encounter bears, and on rare occasion, a mauling or even a killing by a bear occurs. Hey, we're all good red-blooded Americans. We like to be prepared, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. You know, I know that instinctively, but I have been prowling around the wildest for a long, long time. And I have very seldom carried traditional handgun bear protection, because even when I was backpacking in summertime in bear country, I was never attacked by a bear. I've had them come through camp, especially black bears, and raid the food supply kind of thing. But you learn how to function, live in the outdoors with your food stored separately and all the rest of it. Maybe I was just lucky, or I'm that 95% of people who are never bothered by bears. Yet every year you hear of someone being attacked and mauled severely and or killed by a grizzly, usually around Yellowstone, north of us here in Idaho, in that Yellowstone ecosystem. As you said, not quite as frequent in Alaska. I think years ago when I used to photograph quite a bit in Denali, the ongoing line was that it's never been a grizzly attack in the park, which is kind of hard to believe, and maybe that was back in the 80s, and it doesn't apply anymore.
Never one that was documented.
Yeah, never could find that guy.
Right. They just had some mysterious disappearances. You know, the fact is, most folks, most backpackers and so forth will be that guy that's never, experiences an adverse encounter with a bear. However, most of your listeners here on Ron Spomer Outdoors, your viewers are hunters, right? And hunters statistically are also the most likely to be attacked by a bear because of several things. We're in bear country all the time, right? Plus, we're trying to be sneaky. Most backpackers wear bells around their ankles, right? We don't do that because it makes it a little bit hard to sneak up on an.
You know the old line about how can you tell if bear's been eating backpackers? You look in the dung for the little bells.
Yeah, and often the dung will smell like pepper spray.
Well, we're not dealing with pepper spray here, although that is a pretty good alternative. It's pretty effective stuff. But either way, whether you're pulling pepper spray or a handgun, you have got to be ready. You've got to carry it so you can get quick access. You have to train to have that access and function. And for me, a handgun is a lot easier to use instinctively than a bear spray can.
Sure.
And practicing with bear spray is like, well, I practiced and now I'm out of bear spray.
Right. And there are some issues with bear spray that we don't really need to get into, but that's one of them. Another is
wind.
Yep. Another is inadvertent activation. I know several people that have done things like swung a saddle into the back of a truck with bear spray strapped to the saddle horn and had it go off and hit him in the face.
Oh,
there's a case just recently of a lady fumbling with somebody else's backpack to put a water bottle back or something in Alaska. Yep. Bear spray went off and hit her in the face. Worst case scenario is having one go off in a super cub.
Oh, yeah.
When you and the pilot get gassed by your bear spray, real problem. Bad. So listen to your pilots. If you're ever in a super cub, give your bear spray to them. They'll put it in a little canister and strap it to the outside of the plane.
And if I remember right, you cannot get on a commercial jet flight with bear spray.
Right.
Can you even put it in your check bag?
I don't believe you're supposed to.
No, you can't even put it in check bags.
Most air taxi services in Alaska have a whole box full of donated cans of bear spray. Yeah. So lots of times, if you talk to them ahead of time, if you're going on a hunt there, you don't need to buy one. Just say, can I borrow one of your cast-offs?
Good way to do it. All right, so let's say we are going to talk about handguns.
Yes.
No bear spray now. And I think the question always starts with how big? 44 Magnum, right? That's the biggest one you need? Do you need to go to a 450 Casull? How about a 460 or a 500 Smith & Wesson? What do you think?
There's multiple schools of thought here, and all of them have validity. What it really boils down to is you, the shooter. Mm-hmm. What are you willing to pack day in and day out for, say, 10 days on a backcountry caribou or moose hunt in Alaska, or a week bow hunting in the wilderness in Wyoming? And as a side note, bow hunters have a really good excuse to carry a handgun because they don't have a rifle, right? You and I do a lot of rifle hunting. And if I'm packing a 45-70 and thick timber on an elk hunt, I'm not going to carry a handgun because I've already got a fast handling, potent bear defense tool. I will keep it very close to hand, whether I'm, cooking dinner over my jet boil or cutting up an elk. And I have a story about why. The critical importance of keeping your self-defense tool right close to hand that I'll tell here in a little bit. But for bow hunters, a handgun, if you're in serious bear country and you're worried about it, a handgun is really worth carrying. The size and the arguments for what is right for you varies, and I'm just going to say it, a lot on shooter capability. I've seen some hardcore old guard handgunners that are very accustomed to shooting big bore handguns that can empty a single action revolver into a 12-inch black bullseye at 7 yards in something like 3 to 4 seconds. Mm-hmm. That's very impressive. And we're talking potent cartridges up in that, even 475 line ball type range. Really, really impressive. How many people can do that?
Yeah.
Maybe 1 out of 1,000. Yeah. So for the rest of us, there's a spectrum of handguns that tend to work better. And let's start with some of the options that I've found work really well for me. And being a gun guy, I make my living writing and podcasting about guns. And I like to try different stuff. So I'm not always packing the same thing. Mm-hmm. Let's start with cartridges, right? The 44 Magnum you mentioned is a really classic choice for a lot of people because it's quite readily available. The traditional wisdom is to shoot a heavy, expanding, copper jacketed bullet for black bears, and in my mind, even grizzly bears, like interior bears, where you're likely, if you have an encounter, to be dealing with an adolescent male, so he's not probably going to be more than 400 pounds, or an angry female. No, she's a bundle of nervous rage, right? Yeah, she's still probably not going to be a 1,000-pound bear.
Right.
So 44 Magnum with something like a 280 grain Swift A-frame.
Yeah.
Really prime for that type of use.
So you want a bigger, heavier bullet for penetration, right?
Yes. And if you're going into coastal brown bear country, step it up even a bit more. Go to hard cast bullet in that 300 to 310 grain range. Yeah. Because one of those will just about shoot stem to stern through a big bear. And that's important if you're trying to break down the skeletal frame and slow that bear down.
And that's what you need. You don't need to hit the heart and lungs because that bear will rip you to a new lifespan. If you do that and wait for him to die, you have to incapacitate his motor skills, right? Central nervous system or a major structural bone breaking, right?
A lot of people will try and shoot for the head, and often with the bear right there, you can shoot for the head and that bullet will still angle back through the length of his body, right? And even if you miss everything else, but you break his pelvis, if your bullet's got that far, you've just done yourself a huge favor, right? That bear can't move nearly as well. So that's why you'd go to a big, heavy, hard cast bullet in really any of these cartridges. So the 44 Magnum, the trouble with most people's decisions when they buy one is they get a big one, right? We're Americans. Bigger is better, especially if you're from Texas.
Right.
So I tried that. Didn't work very well. And there's a reason. Carrying a heavy handgun day after day in rough country gets exhausting. And pretty quick you realize, my percentage chance of having a problem with a bear is so low. And yet I know I'm going to 100% be tired of this gun today. I'm going to gamble and leave it in the tent.
So it starts.
So you start reasoning your way out of it, right? And that's your first bad decision. So hand me that little Smith & Wesson right there, if you would. This has become one of my go-to handguns for bear country. It's a 5-shot, medium-size frame Smith & Wesson with a 2 3/4 inch barrel. I load it with either that 280 grain Swift A-frame bullet if I'm in grizzly or black bear country. If I'm going to Alaska's coast where there's a lot of big Kodiak bears, I like to hunt Sitka blacktails on Kodiak Island. Then I'll load it with a 305 grain Garrett hardcast factory load. That thing exits this muzzle at 1,200 feet per second.
1,200.
Even this little short muzzle.
Whoa.
That's a serious load, right? But the great beauty of this handgun is that I can carry it all day long, and I kind of forget that it's even with me. Now, I get a lot of questions on how do you carry your handguns. Most guys want to go to a chest rig, right? It's readily accessible. Whether you're hiking, you're driving your truck, you're on your four-wheeler, butchering your moose, whatever the case may be. I have a problem with that because I always have a binocular. And whether you have that in a case on your chest or it's hanging loose, you got problems. I had a Swarovski get a chip in the front lens from the hammer, actually of that gun, in a chest rig. Yeah. And that hurt.
That hurts, yeah.
I quit.
Not as much as the bear biting you, but still.
That's right. So I quit carrying that gun in a chest rig. Yep. What I've found works best for me, and you can see the wear on this little holster right here. This is by Galco Gun Leather. It's their Phoenix model. And if you look around the back side, you can either wear it strong side with your standard belt loops, or you can run your belt this way, cross draw. And that's what I do. So that gun lives right in front of my left hip. It's slender enough that I can put a backpack waist belt around it, keeps it tight to my body and stable, and it's on me, not my backpack. Another very important feature.
And that's another one that I wrestled with is I'm backpacking and I get all set up with a nice holster. Everything works great. Strap that backpack on. It's like, what the? Now I've got to take it off and put it on the belt of the backpack. Then I take my backpack off and I go do some chores around camp. Oops, it's back on the backpack. You'd only have to be about 10 feet away from your firearm when that grizzly attacks and you're screwed.
And this story I'm going to tell
story. Imagine
an
that.
Element of that. And the cool thing is, so you can get that type of holster for just about any firearm. This is for my other go-to gun, which is a 10 millimeter, and it's even more slender, right? That pretty well disappears under a backpack strap. Right. Tuck it right in front of that protruding hip bone. It'll kind of blend into your body and it won't hurt you. I've carried a lot of heavy packs a long way with this type of holster. So let's get to the guns.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about this one. This is a good choice. Smith & Wesson Model 69 Combat Magnum and 44 Magnum. If you want to carry a 44, that's my number one recommendation.
All steel?
It's all stainless steel.
You can get it in titanium.
I don't want it in titanium.
Tell me why.
Because they're so hard to shoot. Even this one is not easy to shoot, right? If you're pretty serious about it, you can learn to master it. However, I had a friend drew a good Wyoming elk tag, heavy grizzly country, and it was an archery tag. He needed to borrow a handgun because his 44 Magnum has an 8-inch barrel and he was sick of carrying it. He came over to borrow mine, and just on a whim, I stuck this 1911 10 millimeter into the truck and we went out. I've got a big steel plate that's about charging grizzly bear size. It's actually made for shooting 50 BMG by military snipers. So it's got a lot of angle on it. And I can shoot it from fairly close and it'll just direct those bullets down into the ground. Real safe for fast practice in bear scenarios, right? He shot that 44 Magnum and was really struggling with it. Now, this guy has been shooting all his life. He's a veteran shooter, and he couldn't master it. He would come out of the holster and shoot his 5 shots, trying to put them down there pretty quickly, and he'd get 2 or 3 out of the cylinder on this target that's 20 inches wide and 2.5 feet tall. Finally, knowing he was a 1911 guy from way back, I pulled out this 1911. This is just a simple Kimber. What model is this one? I think it's a TLE2.
Yeah, it is.
In 10 millimeter. This carries 8 rounds in the magazine plus 1 in the chamber. So compared to the 5 that the 44 Magnum carries, nearly double. I just handed it to him, said, strap on this holster, and just said, go. He pulled the 1911 out, one bing, 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 and put all 8 shots into a cantaloupe-sized group on the center of that target. I said, borrow that one.
Yes. And use a hard cast bullet, heavyweight for the caliber, right?
I do.
What
the
do you
same
like in the
thing.
10 mm?
That one you're holding right there is a 180 grain Swift A-frame. Okay.
Yep.
So it's pretty light, actually, for what you consider a heavy 10 millimeter bullet. However, it's tough, and it's going pretty fast, about 1,200 feet per second. Now, the same sort of thing. I carry that in black bear and grizzly country. If I'm going into coastal brown bear country, I switch to a 220 grain hard cast bullet by Buffalo Bore.
Yeah.
And I had to put the heaviest springs I could find, recoil springs I could find in this handgun. It was running anything reliable, including those heavy ones. It was kicking the brass 40 feet. It told me I had a little more energy compressing that recoil spring than necessary. Put a heavy one in there, and it drops the brass 10 feet away in the perfect position, 100% reliable.
Now, a lot of folks are going to say, wait a minute, what about wearing out your handgun? You use those big, heavy loads, and you're going to be wearing out your handgun, to which I would say, this isn't for practicing every day.
Right.
This is for that rare opportunity. Once you've practiced enough to get proficient with that gun, and you can practice with your lighter loads.
Sure.
But once you're up against that attacking grizzly bear, I don't care if that gun is then a throwaway at that point.
Right.
I just need to stop that bear.
And with a heavy recoil spring in there, you're not slamming the back of that slide hard enough to crack it or fatigue it over time.
Yeah.
The only downside to that is it becomes quite stiff to work right here. If you don't have strong hands, this gun is not for you. Okay? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, that's a little bit heavy, but hey, once you're ready.
Yep. And I do carry cocked and locked in the backcountry.
Do you?
That's what these guns are designed for. And if you ever, the alternate just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And that's another good discussion.
Hold on, Mr. Bear. Let me get cocked and loaded here.
Right.
Yeah, you got to draw and
you
shoot.
only have one hand.
Yeah.
If that.
And most of those bear attacks that you hear about, it's just like, he was there just, I don't know where he even came from, but he was on me just like that. I didn't even have time to swing my rifle around, which would put me in a big world of hurt.
So, quick story.
All right.
Real world example on the Alaska news a couple years back. Moose hunter shot a moose, ran into the bushes. He went after it with his .338, and he had a 44 Magnum. I think it was in a cross draw. The bear charged him. Sorry, he was tracking the moose, right? Okay. And a bear charged him from 15 feet or so. Yeah. The bear had found the moose like almost instantly.
Wow.
And wanted to claim it. And this guy tried to bring his .338 rifle to bear on the bear. And it slapped it so hard that it bent the barrel.
What?
When they recovered, and they were doing the scene, right? They recovered it. It had a bent barrel. Of course, the rifle off into the bushes. The bear took him down, but came so fast it overshot him a little bit. So it's reaching down underneath its own brisket, trying to grab his head, and its teeth are scraping off at his skull. It couldn't get a purchase. You've heard those horror stories, right?
I can feel it.
He managed to get his 44 Magnum out and cranked it with one hand to bear on this bear. And put 4 shots into it wherever it was pointing. Right? Fast as he could, double action. This is another advantage of a double action revolver.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll never have slide interference when a bear is laying on you.
Yeah.
The bear jumped and ran off, and he obviously survived with some scars on his skull,
Mm-hmm.
right? They never did recover that bear. They know it died because it had 444 magnums through its abdomen or vitals somewhere, but they couldn't find it. But because he was able to get that out, activate it with one hand at bite the bear distances, he saved his own life with that gun.
That's an unbearable story.
Yes. So my friend carried this. Now, the modern trend in 10 millimeters is not to carry a 1911. I love this gun, and it's my go-to because it's so easy to shoot well. Single action trigger, very crisp. The weight feels right to me. I'm like my buddy Joe. I'm a 1911 guy from way back, and I just shoot it well. Mm-hmm. This is candidly a more modern and probably better choice. Anything in this type of firearm. This is a Springfield, but you can get a Glock or a Smith & Wesson or now an FN or a SIG. They're all making big 10 millimeters now.
What are the downsides?
The striker fired mechanism inside makes it a little harder to shoot super accurately because the trigger will never be able to equal a 1911. Right. However, this one has Springfield's factory trigger tune on it, and it's a very good trigger. You can see it's empty. Give that trigger a try, Ron.
Wow.
That's a pretty usable trigger. Now, why would you go with this? They're a little bit lighter in weight because they have a polymer frame, lighter than the 1911 to begin with. And here's the big thing. Compare the magazines. This one holds 8. This one holds 15 in the magazine. Plus, if you want to top off 1 in the pipe. That is more than 3 times as much as the 44 Magnum. And for the guy that handles a 10 millimeter better than the heavy recoil of a lightweight 44 Magnum, that's a big advantage. Another nice thing about these is you can usually find one for $600 or $700.
Yeah, they're not expensive.
They cost less than a 1911, and you can abuse the heck out of it. They're like a wheelbarrow. They're hard to break.
Now, 1911's got to bring up the 45. What is wrong with the 45 auto in a classic 1911?
So the 45 auto is a very, very good personal protection tool against human-sized critters. That's what it's made for. Even a full metal jacket imparts an immediate wallop. And of course, an expanding bullet does even better. It has a downside. Frontal diameter is too big for its sectional density, so you don't get the penetration you need on a bear. They have that big clobbering effect on 200-pound varmints, but when you are facing a 400 to 800-pound grizzly or a 1,200-pound brown bear,
what are you looking at your chest on a person facing you? Not much depth.
Not very much.
You got to go that far just to get to a grizzly's vitals.
Or more. Especially if you hit a big shoulder bone or something. So the 45 shoots typically 185 to a 230 grain bullet, going between 750 and 950 feet per second. Not very much, a lot of frontal diameter. That 10 millimeter will shoot that 220 grain cast bullet, hard cast bullet, the same speed as the 44 Magnum, 1,200 feet per second. It's heavier, it's higher sectional density. It's going a lot faster. You're going to get better penetration.
Speaking of penetration, you remember Phil Shoemaker in that 9 millimeter bear? Phil Shoemaker is a professional master guide in Alaska. He's lived up there most of his adult life in the wilderness, and he guides fishermen as well as hunters, lots of brown bear. And he knows his brown bears. And the one around camp has never been a problem, and he's got some fishermen who've been with him many times before. So we wasn't too worried about it. That day they were flying out and thought, let's just go down to the river and make a few casts before the plane comes to go home, kind of thing. And Phil was tired of carrying his 44 or 454, whatever his standard was. And he knows all the local bears. There's not going to be a problem. I'll just take my 9 millimeter along. Bear attack. The 2 folks he was guiding dropped immediately when this huff bear comes out of nowhere in tall grass. It runs right over them, focused on them, not Phil, who's just off to the side a bit, I guess. And it is looking around for these people. And Phil knows he's got to protect them, and he is within spitting distance of this bear, maybe even touching. He pulls out that 9 millimeter and proceeds to put him behind the shoulder, I assume, in the chest. What, 7 shots?
I believe it was a 6-round magazine, and he had one in the pipe. I asked Phil, because he said he put the first one crossways through the bear, And he said he went to spinning. And I said, what did you do then? Did you just hold center of blur and go to work? And he said, oh no, I timed it. Every time his ribs would come sideways, I'd put another through. Only a man with Phil's experience is going to have that kind of presence of mind.
I believe he did it too. He could do that. But he was using a hard cast bullet, heavy for caliber.
Yes. Buffalo bore, 147 grain hard cast bullet.
That's a big, heavy bullet for a little 9mm.
Yeah.
But it goes to show what you can do with that penetration. That's why you have to forget about your hollow points, forget about your lightweight, your velocity. It's mass, momentum, driving deep.
On the biggest bears especially.
Yeah.
Okay. It's funny, I asked him, how do you pick your loads? And he said, well, I test them all on brown bear skulls. How many people have enough brown bear skulls laying around to test penetration on?
Wow.
Great guy. Yeah. Grizzly Skins of Alaska is his outfit.
Yeah, check him out, but don't necessarily grab a 9mm for your bear protection.
No. Even he said it wouldn't be his first choice again.
Yeah, no kidding.
So shifting gears now, let's go from what true big bore guys consider relatively moderate recoil, 10mm and 44 Magnum, into the proper heavy revolver stuff. So we're talking everything from a 454 Cazul, which is a 45 caliber high pressure cartridge that shoots heavy bullets really hard, up through the 475 line ball, the 480 Ruger like I've got here, and even up into the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum and so forth. This is the only one that I've found that I can personally afford that I like to carry. Now this is a single action. That guy laying under the bear with it on his chest would not have been able to activate this as effectively. He'd have had to cock it every time he fired under that bear. However, it shoots a 48 caliber bullet pretty darn hard. Carries 5 rounds in the magazine, has a nice Bisley grip, so it's pretty controllable. So this gun, I like this because it's a balance of that extreme level of authority in your cartridge with a certain amount of shootability. It's not going to shock your socks off every time.
What's the weight of that?
Trigger. It's not bad. It's just a little bit more than the 1911, right? And I carry it in this holster. It's a little different. I like the thumb brakes on these holsters because I can just slap that as I draw and pull it out. This one, I've got to pop that latch and then I can draw it. Thumb brake is faster. Other than that, though, it's the same type of cross draw or strong side holster.
Let me ask you, though, if you're carrying this one because you like the size of that bullet and what it does, you've still got a single action, and that bear comes out of nowhere, you have time to cock. Or are you carrying a cock? You can't carry that.
No, you never carry that one cocked. You just have to practice. Now, you can opt for something like a Ruger Red Hawk that's a double action, but they're exponentially heavier than this. You can go to something like a Smith & Wesson X-frame in a 460 or a 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. Again, they're double actions. They're just cinder blocks to carry if you're in the backcountry for days on end, running on fumes, right? This one is just carryable enough. So when you draw this gun, you cock it as you come up. After that, you run it with your support side's thumb. Learn tricks from cowboy action shooters here. You can shoot this gun pretty quickly. Your recoil is still going to be up above your head here. And then you got to come down, reacquire your target before you shoot again. You're going to cock as you come down. Just not as fast.
But see, that tells me why you want to use this big, heavy bullet, because you might only get one of them in that bear. I hear what you're saying about practicing and doing what you're doing, but boy, knowing how quickly those bears can move.
Yeah.
I think you
so
better hit 'em with
fast.
that first shot.
There is that. There is also, though, the arguing side where, the big bore guys will always say you might only get one. Put it where it counts, right? Take your time, use that big bullet. Well, when you're under that level of stress and that much of an adrenaline dump and the puppy in the back of your brain starts driving, it's real hard to stay deliberate and do like some call them 9mm Phil and time that bear's spin to put those bullets crossways through his rib cage, right? In that case, it's much easier to come up with a semi-automatic and pop, 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 pop. If he's 3 feet away, you don't worry too much about precision shooting. Right? If you can get 4 or 5 of those heavy hard cast 10mm passing down the length of his body, you're more likely to have a higher percentage of breaking bone. So as you can see, I like both camps, right? I use all these types of pistols. when you pick, it's entirely individual. Most people are going to choose one and work to get good with it. And that's the right thing to do.
Okay, I was just going to say, now, you're confusing yourself, at least with me. I like to get one thing, stick with it, especially on instant reaction. You don't have time to think. You don't have to remember how to run it. You're just like riding a bicycle. Which one do you pick, or do you still bounce around? Do you consistently carry this or this?
It depends on where I'm going, but these two get the least field time. Those two, it's almost evenly split, but I don't generally take this into brown bear country. I will on occasion. There's no reason other than I'm really partial to it. Brown bear country is also saltwater country, and it can be hard on pistols. It's nice to have something that's synthetic, stainless, and really durable. As you can see, neither of those are the extremely hard kicker, but I think it's just that I have a lot of time with those. They're fairly light, compact. They fit underneath my waist belt on my backpack nicely. Yeah.
And I think the other consideration for me, at least, would be that overall, as a reputation for a dangerous bear, browns are not nearly as dangerous as interior grizzlies. They just don't have that nasty attitude. They often say, well, they've got plenty to eat with all those salmon, so they generally don't bother you. And that's been my experience up there. I've had them come close to us while we're fishing to see if they could maybe steal a fish. One tried to get in the boat, but we never got that aggressive approach that you can see with grizzlies sometimes. So I can see where you would compromise in even brown bear country with a lighter gun, because you're probably not going to use it, and then you can go with the 7mm. You go with your 10mm fill.
Yeah. So that's a good selection, folks. If you can get somewhere where you can try a variety, find a friend that'll let you shoot his selection. Find a gun shop that'll let you rent the guns and see what works for you, because like my buddy, he really thought he needed a 44 Magnum and a little one so he could carry it comfortably. Couldn't hit with it. When he went to the 10mm, he became deadly. He never saw a bear on that trip, but if he'd had a deadly encounter, I was much more comfortable knowing he was carrying the 1911 than any 44 Magnum.
Something I would add to all of this, folks, is that a hunt with a partner in bear country. I used to hunt wilderness Idaho solo. Thinking I was pretty cocky and knew what I was doing, Then you think back, if a bear had attacked me after I had an elk down or a sheep down and I'm working on it, I wouldn't have stood a chance. The rifle's laying over here on my pack. I'm doing my work. I'm all bloody. I smell pretty delicious, and bingo, I'm done for. I need somebody like Joseph with his rifle standing over me, or a handgun on me, ready to be used with lots of practice. Now, what's lots of practice? If somebody's I'm going to take your advice and buy one of these, and then I'm going to really get good. How much time do they put in? How do you do this?
I divide the practice into two categories. One is everyday carry. So you're very familiar with how that firearm feels on your body, how it works under your pack. If you're out training for a backcountry hunt and you're doing the so-called rucking, you have 40 pounds in your pack and you go 6 miles every Saturday morning or whatever, take it with you and get used to the feel of it. Meanwhile, I had an old friend. Actually, you knew him, Jay Guthrie. He passed away. He was my age, and he died at, 37, I think.
Whoa.
Yeah. But he carried concealed most of his adult life, and I asked him what his practice routine was, and I liked his answer. He said, every week I replenish the cartridges in my firearms magazine, right? And he said, the way I empty it is I go shoot them out. Every week he was getting a little bit of practice with his handgun and making sure he had fresh loads in it. I thought that's really smart. And so, it's harder to do that with something like this if you were to choose a big bore single action, but I would say just get out and run a few loads through it. Run light loads if you can find them for practice.
Can I ask that? Could you even go with wax bullets or something? And because a lot of people are going to say, I can't get out to a range that frequently.
I've never tried that, but it's worth
at least pursuing. You're going through the motions. You're not going to get the recoil practice, but
And with a double action or a single action revolver, it's absolutely worth doing a lot of dry fire practice. Just get really familiar with the feel of that trigger. Otherwise, just shoot accurately. Speed up as you achieve your level of accuracy. There's no benefit in going out and saying, all right, I got to get really fast with this brand new gun. I'm going to go bing, 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 bing. You never hit your target, right? You got to shoot it know you're hitting, and then you slowly speed up. You even watch competitive shooters at the beginning of a match, speed shooters, they'll engage their first stage fairly slowly. They come up smoothly, bing, 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 and they ramp into it once all the pieces start firing.
You know, I've heard that grizzlies do the same thing. That first attack of the season on a hunter, they come in kind of slow, and then they speed it up, and then they really start to rip you up.
They get really good at it. You know, I was on a solo caribou hunt, fly-in hunt in Alaska a few years ago. Got dropped off, went out to glass for caribou, and I saw 5 grizzlies that first night.
Welcome to Alaska, buddy.
Oh, boy. Yeah. You want to be prepared in a case like that.
Yeah.
So I want to tell my story.
Oh, you have a story.
Well, it's the one that illustrates a few points.
All right.
And this is a true story that happened in Wyoming. If you Google it, you can find it. There's a professional big game guide with a bow hunter. Mm-hmm. He was married and had 5 kids. The guide was. His bow hunter hit an elk poorly, and they didn't find it till the next morning, about mid-morning. They finally managed to track it down. The guide took off his pack, set it to the side, and put his handgun on top of it. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a chance to read the official report by law enforcement years ago. I'll give you the best details as my memory can draw them up, right? Mm-hmm. I may make a few small mistakes, but the gist of it is he set his pistol about 10 feet to the side. As I understand, he was carrying something like a 10 millimeter Glock. Good choice. Was working on the elk when a sow grizzly charged from downhill, emerged from the trees about 40 yards away and charged. I don't think he saw it right away. The hunter saw the bear coming and hollered. The bear hit the guide, took him down. Now, the guide had bear spray on him. He got it out, but was not able to deploy it in time. Mm-hmm. He didn't have his handgun on his person, and the bear went to chewing on him. Mm-hmm. The client picked up the handgun, tried to shoot the bear, and couldn't make it go off. Mm-hmm. Now, that tells you. So we've got one, and I want to be really respectful here because we're talking about somebody who lost his life here, and he still has a family. I feel for them because I've been in the position of this guide many times, right? But he should have kept his handgun on his body, not on his pack. And he should have had a cartridge chambered in it.
He did have a cartridge chamber.
Well, I'm assuming here, I'm doing a little bit of, backseat analysis, but if the client picked that gun up, a Glock type gun, off of his pack and tried to shoot the bear, he's mashing that trigger. If there was a cartridge in the barrel, in the chamber, it would have gone off. Yep. So that's problem number 2. Then, panicking, the guide the client tried to throw the gun to the guide so he could make it work and kill the bear that's chewing on it. Oh, man. Then the client took off. Okay. He had a bow, I presume, but he must have not felt that it was adequate. He ran to the horses, which were tied, I think, a couple hundred yards away. Ooh. Got on one of them and went charging up the ridge. And miracle of miracles, he got a phone call through from the top of the ridge, which is very, very rare. That area usually doesn't have cell service. Fish and Game didn't get there till pretty late. The bear took off. They picked the guy up, and the guide was nowhere to be seen. The bear was working on the elk carcass, if memory serves. And it got dark. They came back. I mean, there's a man killing bear potentially in the area, right? They came back the next morning at dawn, and they killed the bear, okay, because it was still on the carcass. Then they managed to track by the blood trail where the guide had gone. He'd got away from that bear. Really? She had bear spray residue all over her face. So he had eventually gotten his bear spray activated and sprayed the bear, got her off him. Mm-hmm. And then he crawled about 40 or 50 yards to a quaky sapling grove and hid there. Mm-hmm. And she and her cub tracked him down and killed him in that grove. Wow. And the reason they actually had to go hunt the cub down too, because they found bite marks on his skull and other areas that matched they were cub size. I mean, it was a 2-year-old cub. It wasn't a yearling or a baby. So, such a sad story. But if that gun had been on his belt, and had a round in the chamber. Either one of those things could have potentially saved this guy's life.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Monday morning quarterbacking, obviously, but it's worth you've got to consider this stuff because this is what makes a difference. Yeah. The next time you're out, don't put your gun 10 away. Give it to the hunter. Make sure he knows how to use it. You watch for the bears while I work on this animal. That's why I was saying about having a partner in the wilderness, in bear country. And go with a partner.
I would add, make sure you can trust your partner with a handgun. If he's a bow hunter and he doesn't know handguns, you don't want him shooting at a bear that's crawling around on you because he's maybe going to shoot you.
There's been many a hunter who's been under attack and someone tried to shoot the animal that was doing it and ended up shooting the guy underneath the animal.
Yeah.
So that's something. I mean, all of this is a big concern, folks. You don't take it lightly. Really study this stuff the way Joseph has, or just be like me and hope you get lucky and no bear attacks you. I may be running out of time on that one. I'm probably going to need to start carrying more regularly.
Well, it never hurts.
Yeah. I will do it occasionally, but that's pretty obvious from what you're telling me that occasionally isn't good enough. You've got to become one with your handgun.
It's never a problem until it is.
Yeah.
Right. There's one other very brief story that happened 2 weeks after the killing in Wyoming that has the opposite ending. It was on a military base in Alaska. 2 soldiers had permits to shoot moose. They shot with a bow. One of them shot a moose, ran off. They had to track it the next day. Kind of poorly hit. They believed it would be dead, and they found it from a distance because there's birds in this thicket. Well, they were pretty savvy. The one of them was still hunting, just took his bow, but the other one took a Glock 10 millimeter and had it ready to go. 40 yards from the thicket, a bear erupted coming toward him. And that soldier, the report said he dropped to one knee. I don't know why, but he did. Drew his 10 millimeter and fired 2 shots. First one centered its chest. The second one centered its skull. Wow. Killed that bear right there.
Wow.
That guy was prepared. He was practiced, and he had a tool that he was competent with.
Yeah, and he was calm. That's the hard thing.
Yep.
You just can't predict how you're going to react under a situation like that. You could fall apart or
it's true.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
All right. I think that about sums it up. What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, as you can see, folks, we're excited to have Joseph Von Benedikt on our team. You can find him on his podcast, right?
Yeah, the Backcountry Hunting Podcast.
Yeah, it's a Backcountry Hunting Podcast. He does that, once a week?
Yeah, it drops once a week. You can find it Friday mornings because it drops at midnight Thursday night.
Ooh, stay up late and listen to Joseph. If you have any questions for me and or Joseph, you can go to my website, ronspomeroutdoors.com, and ask your questions there. You have a website where they can do that sort of thing?
It's better to just email me. You can email me at joseph@backcountrypodcast.com or submit a question on Instagram. I am pretty decent at answering personal messages on Instagram, either the Backcountry Hunting Podcast page or my personal one at Joseph Von Benedikt.
All right. And stay tuned to this YouTube channel, Ron Spomer Outdoors. Joseph is going to be doing some more with me and some standalones because I can see from this one that we don't have to hold his hand. He knows what he's doing.
It's a privilege to join you.
I appreciate it, Joseph. All right. Until next time, guys, hunt honest and shoot straight and stay away from the bears.